Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Major General Neighbors, General Blanchard, Colonel Cole, Colonel Ritchie, Colonel Caldwell, Chief Cole, visitors, friends, and my 172nd family. I am Lieutenant Colonel Shander Adams, and I serve, as you heard, as the Wing Exec Officer for UTA weekends and as the Wing SART during the week. So that's a little plug for the SART. Yeah, we have the Wing SART. So I am honored and privileged to stand before you today as we celebrate Black History Month. This year's theme is exceeding expectations through integrity, service, and excellence. I think it's safe to say that everyone in this room should be able to relate to the theme, as it contains our Air Force core values. Learning how to demonstrate or live the core values is vitally important. After all, living the core values is what is expected of us as airmen. It requires commitment, dedication, and perseverance. The core values are our foundation and our roadmap to success. But for some of us, the road to success is paved with obstacles and hurdles in the form of discrimination. These obstacles and hurdles make the road extremely rocky sometimes. Unfortunately, rocky roads are the norm for most minorities. Speaking as a Black woman who has been traveling that road all my life, most of the time our core values are tested in ways that make us want to give up. Even when we do all the right things, it still seems like it's not enough, and the opportunities for success are increasingly small or non-existent. The expectations that the world has for us are sometimes minimal, and the ones we have for ourselves sometimes follow suit if we don't stay motivated. So how do we exceed those expectations? Through integrity, service, and excellence. We begin by standing on the foundation of our core values and building them. Today I will not be giving you a traditional Black history lesson, but instead I will share with you my story on how I've succeeded several expectations while relying on those core values. I will use quotes from the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. throughout my presentation, as I believe that he was the most influential leader in Black history. I will discuss how the foundation of core values were instilled in me early on, how I use my faith and mentors as motivation to keep moving forward, and lastly, how I believe we can help each other exceed our expectations. My desire is that everyone will be able to take something from my story and use it to help each other. I heard the Reverend T.D. Jakes say, reaching up without reaching out is in vain. Our job as leaders is to lead and guide those who are trying to find their way. My story is an attempt at reaching out and providing guidance for those who may have themselves in similar situations as I. My story begins with a lesson in core values. The foundation of core values was instilled in me by my parents at an early age. We didn't use the same terminology to describe it, but it was the same thing. I was born and raised in Madison County, Mississippi. I grew up in a small community called Gluckstadt, where the majority of the people who lived on my street were related to me. So I'm the 5th child of 10 children. My mother and father were very strict on us. They raised us with Christian values. My mom was a housewife and my dad was a farmer and an officer in the church. My dad was the best example of a leader and provider that I knew. God rest his soul. He demanded respect and he expected excellence. He believed that if you couldn't do something right, don't bother doing it at all. My mom taught us the importance of treating others with dignity and respect, whether we thought they deserved it or not. Together they laid down the law and And trust me, they did not spare the rod. They were honest. We were taught that we should never look down on anyone and that we should always help others. My mom would give to others even when we didn't have much ourselves. She still does this to this day. My dad was the most respected man next to my grandfather, his father, on our street. My parents were in the good people category. Good people meant that you're giving, respectful, hardworking, and honest people. Good people are those who demonstrate or live the core values. So when someone found out who my parents were, they would say, "Oh yeah, they're good people." You see, back then, a person's reputation was everything, and good people was the highest compliment. I learned through my parents how to succeed at life by being honest, helping others, and giving my best. They taught love, not hate. They taught us that others should be able to see the Christ in us. They had what we call the talk. They had to talk with us. Because of an incident involving my older brother, fracturing a white student's jaw after being called the N-word. In the black culture, we're all familiar with the talk. Y'all know what I'm talking about, the talk? I see a few people nodding their head. For those who don't know, the talk is a discussion on how odds are stacked against us because of our race, the need to give 110% at all times, and how to conduct ourselves when discrimination raises its ugly head. My parents also taught me that there were some things that I was going to have to take or accept in this world if I wanted to survive. Little did I know that I would have to rely on these values in order to become successful, because the world would see me and treat me differently because of my race or gender. There are good people and bad people. The white people who lived on my street were good people. But the real world was waiting for me beyond my tight-knit community. I would soon find this out as I graduated high school and was accepted into the University of Southern Mississippi. I was very excited about going to college. You see, I was the first in my family to go to college and graduate. I was already exceeding expectations. It was in the campus bookstore and in the mall there where I was reminded that I wasn't in Gluckstadt anymore, and some people were not good people. A white female cashier who worked in the bookstore refused to touch my hand when I tried to pay her for my purchase and when she gave me my change. I couldn't understand what I had done or said to her to make her act this way. I remembered my parents' lesson about treating others with dignity and respect, whether I thought they deserved it or not. So when she slid me my change on the counter, instead of placing it in my outstretched hand, I just said thank you and quietly waited for my roommate to check out. All the time thinking about what just happened. My roommate got to the counter. She had a different reaction. She caused the scene by getting loud with the cashier. I found myself pulling her out the store. She was extremely upset. We both were. We calmed down and we talked about it, and then we put it behind us. This is what my parents warned me about. Another incident was when a white sales representative at one of the department stores in the mall followed my roommate and I around the store as if we were thieves. The sad part about it was that she didn't know us and we didn't know her. But she assumed we were up to no good just because we were black. My roommate just stopped and stared at the sales rep. With some urging on my part, we quietly exited and then discussed the incident between ourselves. It would have been easy to confront the sales rep about her behavior or tell her a piece of my mind, but I remember my core values and my good people skills. Discrimination cuts like a knife. It hurts. Lesson learned, you can't stop people from being ignorant. You just accept it and press on. Accepting is a skill, and it's so much more than just throwing the incident in the acceptance compartment department of my brain, but I did exactly that. There were other incidents, but I somehow brushed them off. I focused on graduating. My major was criminal justice and my minor was counseling psychology. I wanted to work with juveniles and help them get their lives on track. Unfortunately, this was not a field where jobs were plentiful or paid well. So upon graduating, I didn't have much success at finding a job in that field. I was told that I was either overqualified for jobs or didn't have enough experience. So I got a job at a grocery store, and this is a shocker for some of you young folks. I was making $3.35 an hour. That was good money then, it's minimum wage. I wanted to graduate, I wanted to go to graduate school, but I didn't have the means. My parents couldn't afford it, and neither could I. I never gave the military a second thought until that moment. So I enlisted. I enlisted in the Air Force rather than going to OTS, even though I had a college degree. The truth is, I was afraid of the 6-year enlistment as opposed to the 4. Besides, what did I know about the Air Force? Keep in mind now, this was in 1992. Pre-internet, no Google. I was the second in my family to join the military, but I was the first to join the Air Force. It was there that I was introduced to the Air Force core value. I was no stranger to this. As it turns out, this is what my parents taught me. My plan was to get the GI Bill so I could go to graduate school, complete my 4-year enlistment, then separate. But God had a different plan for me. Sometimes the plans that we have for ourselves don't line up with what God has for us. I was now part of something greater than myself. After completing basic training, I was excited about starting my Air Force career. I was on the road to success, but I always kept in mind that because of my race, my gender, it wouldn't be easy. I realized that in addition to demonstrating the core values, I would need much more in order to keep moving forward. I learned that in order to keep moving forward towards success, I needed motivation that would come from my faith and mentors. I was married now, and I was driving to my first duty station from Keesler Air Force Base to Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. While traveling on I-10, we stopped in this small town in Texas called Vidor to get some gas. This is where I felt so much hate from the people there. They showed it in their stares and their behavior. They looked at us as if we didn't belong there. I looked around and I did not see another person of color anywhere. All eyes were on us. I reluctantly went into the store to pay for the gas as my husband pumped it. I gave the clerk my money. She pointed at the counter. I put it on the counter and she passed my change back to me on the counter. Sound familiar? I knew the drill by now. The look she gave me was piercing, hate-filled. You know the old saying, if looks could kill, let's just say I'd be dead twice over. I started praying in my mind. Where was this coming from? I didn't know them. They didn't know us. I literally almost ran out of the store. I told my husband to get us out of there fast. He and I briefly discussed this. And once again, I threw it in the acceptance corner of my mind. This was one time in my life where I truly feared for my life. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, nothing in this world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. My fears forced me to lean on a power greater than me. I thank God for getting us out of the situation without any incidents. He allowed us to make it to our destination. My faith was the motivation that I needed to keep moving forward. I was now working at Holloman Air Force Base with the Force Base Warning Squadron team. I felt the work we were doing made valuable contributions. I was given the opportunity to work with a diverse group of people where I learned to appreciate the diversity in thinking. Most of them were good people who found commonalities that brought about unity. This would soon come to an end when I decided to leave the Air Force after my son was born. I did what was called the Palace Chase, which meant that I had 1 year left on my enlistment. And so I agreed to join the Mississippi Air National Guard and serve 2 years. Up until this point, I utilized faith as my motivation to keep moving forward on the road to success, but I needed someone to help me navigate. This is where I learned how to utilize my mentors as motivation. It turns out that I knew less about Mississippi Air National Guard than I did Big Air Force. This was another first in my family. After being in the Guard for almost 8 years, after I completed my master's degree, another first, my commander at the time, Captain Jackie Brown, pulled me to the side and asked if I'd ever considered becoming an officer. She stated that she thought I would make a great officer based on my ability to lead, by my demonstration of the core values. I quickly said no without even thinking. She was a well-respected officer who epitomized the core values. She was an excellent leader and led by example. She was good people. She basically placed me in the good people category when she talked about my qualities. So when she strongly suggested I take the AFOQT, I couldn't say no. So I made a few unsuccessful attempts to get scheduled for the test. The individual responsible for scheduling me for the test canceled one date without notifying me and then didn't show up for the other date. This was very frustrating for me. I had to take leave from my civilian job for those dates. I showed up on those dates and was turned away. By this time, Captain Brown was now Major Brown and had taken over as Commander of Personnel. I explained to her the delay in getting scheduled for the test. She told me that she would handle it and not worry about it. But before she could, one of the recruiters, who was from my hometown, knew that I was trying to become an officer. So he sat me down and gave me the talk. He also got me signed up to take the test at the MEPS instead. I received a phone call later from personnel attempting to schedule me for the test on base. I tried to understand why it was so difficult in the first place to schedule me for the test. After all, I had no issues with him prior to my inquiries about AFOQT. He was a white male. I had male friends who didn't have any issues getting scheduled. Was it because of my race or gender? Maybe both. I didn't want to believe that I was being discriminated against, but my experiences told me otherwise. Prior to my discrimination incident, I did not see color, but because of those incidents, I was forced to see color. I relied once again on my core values and motivated myself through faith. I took the test, passed it. Prior to the test, taking the test, and going through the whole ordeal, I had no expectation of becoming an officer. But now I was more determined than ever. Major Brown, who looked like me and was good people, motivated me to become an officer just like her. She became my mentor and had to talk with me. The next step was going to MEPS for my commissioning physical. I remember being told by the clinic here that the MEPS disqualified me for commission. The same doctor who qualified me for active duty in 1992 disqualified me 10 years later, even though my medical history had not changed other than giving birth twice. I was devastated and ready to throw in the towel. How could I tell my mentor this? It was only because of my faith and the confidence that she had in me that I decided to continue to fight the disqualification. I started asking questions, but was mindful of using my chain of command. I remember talking to my colleagues about it, but they couldn't help. I spoke with my current commander, but this issue wasn't high on his list, so I had to wait. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. It seemed as if I wasn't getting anywhere. I wanted to tell my mentor, but she was no longer in my chain of command. I felt trapped, but I found myself praying and putting my trust in God, using faith, but not being able to use my mentor as motivation while still exhibiting the core value was a challenge. Dr. King says, take the first step in faith You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. One day, Colonel Michael McCullough, who was the Mission Support Group commander at the time, asked me about my progress on becoming an officer. He was my group commander, and he was good people. But I didn't want to go over my commander's head. But Colonel McCullough opened the door, so I walked in. I explained to him my issue. He asked me if I had been informed of a waiver request. He said they do them all the time. I told him no one informed me about a waiver. He told me not to worry, that he would take care of it because the clinic worked for him. He offered to mentor me and I accepted. By the way, having more than one mentor is not a bad thing. It was at that time that I realized how God was working through Colonel McCullough on my behalf. This provided me with the motivation I needed to continue. A waiver was granted and I was off to the Academy of Military Science, AMS, for officer training. It was there that I would face one of my greatest challenges. At this point, I have been able to rely on my core values while utilizing my faith and mentors to keep me moving. AMS is where I had to do so again and again in a major way. Captain Freddie Goldwire was a faculty advisor, FA, while I was there. I was very excited because he was a black male and the only black male staff member there, FA there. Out of 4 females in my flight, including me, I was the only black person. Out of 125 students, less than 8% were black. Captain Goldwire was an active duty guy. He had been an EO officer. He gave me the talk when I got there. Captain Goldwire was good people. There was an FA who gave me a failing grade on a marching exercise as he stated that I collided with another flight while I was leading my flight. The flight leader from the other flight ran across my flight while I was marching him. His flight was stationary at the time. He stated that he decided to get on the other side of my flight as we approached his. Despite my flight members and the other flight leaders' testimony, I was given a failing grade. The FA wouldn't even talk to me about it. Captain Goldwire gave me 2 options. 1, I can file an EO complaint for discrimination, which would not get resolved by the time I completed training. 2, take the hit and press forward. He became my mentor. He advised me to file a complaint anyway. At this point, I had so many people counting on me to complete this course, I felt the only option was to just press forward. After all, my GPA could handle it. My mental health took a blow as I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I was told that particular FA graded all females harshly and would try to fail the black females. Acceptance, as I was taught, was so far removed at this time. It was during that time that I felt as if all the pain of every discrimination incident that I had thrown in the acceptance corner of my mind were all coming to the forefront. It was evident that I had not fully accepted any of them. Feelings of hurt, anger, inadequacy, and fear occupied my mind. Giving up was not an option, but how could I move forward? Philippians chapter 4, verse 13 states, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. When I would have those sleepless nights, I would use this as affirmation. This became one of my favorite motivational scriptures in the Bible. Once again, I was encouraged to fall back on my core values and use faith and mentors as my motivation to keep moving forward. Captain Goldwire decided to make me an element leader to show everyone the confidence that he had in me. This was not the time for me to give up. Dr. King said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you keep it moving forward. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant and and came back to the 172nd scarred and shaken, but ready for my next step. The issue of discrimination is bigger than any one person and will take a collaborative effort on the part of everyone in combating it. I believe that we, meaning all of us, can help ourselves and others exceed expectation when discrimination occurs. We must first utilize mentorship programs and identify trailblazers. We must not wait for opportunities to come to us. We must look for them. And lastly, we must enlist the help of our white friends and good people. These are some things that I've used to help me exceed expectations. By no means did they stop discrimination, but they helped me get to where I am today. Once back at the 172nd as an EO officer, I latched on to now Lieutenant Colonel Jackie Brown. She taught me how to lead from the front, continue demonstrate core values and the importance of being a professional at all times. There were few minority officers on base and even fewer black females at the time. I didn't realize how few there were until I had to complete the annual report for EO, which included the base's demographics. We were clearly underrepresented. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Cranston offered to mentor me also as I reported to him administratively. He was the wing exec officer at the time, and he was a white male. This wasn't the first time I had a white male as a mentor. He was great when it came down to doing my job. He and I had countless conversations. He was good people, God rest his soul. He and I discussed the underrepresentation. He admitted that after seeing the numbers, there was a huge discrepancy. He suggested that I meet with the wing commander. I worked with 3 wing commanders during my time in the EO office. I spoke with 2 of them personally about the issue. One commander asked how could we make minorities more competitive. After further discussion, the commander understood that it wasn't that minorities were not competitive, but the selection process was broken. Prior to my promotion to captain, I met with the current wing commander at the time to discuss my next move. I was later given a command opportunity with services flight, and I did not get a chance to finish what I started in EO. As I moved up the rank, the reality that there were little to no opportunities for minorities in higher ranks set in. After all, I saw the hurt on Colonel Jackie Brown's face when she did not get selected for an 06 billet that she was more than qualified for and deserved. This was definitely a major setback. If she couldn't make it, then who would? When services merged with personnel, I became an FSS officer. I encountered my first female commander since Lieutenant Colonel Brown, Lieutenant Colonel Sanders. It was refreshing. She became an informal mentor for me. We worked well together. She groomed me for the next step in my career. We even went so far as to name the area of our offices where we were co-located, CC, Cougar Cave. If you have questions about that, I want to defer that to Sheriff Sanders. Prior to my promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, I once again met with the current wing commander at the time to discuss available opportunities. I continued to be motivated through faith and mentors. I continued to live the core values, and I demonstrated professionalism at all times. There were no command opportunities available. I had thoughts about retirement back when I was a captain, but now I was seriously contemplating it. Instead of waiting for opportunities to come to me, I decided to look for them outside of the 172nd, with the wing commander's approval, of course. I applied for an Air Force ROTC commander's position at Jackson State and was selected. I was informed by the previous Air Force commander there that I was the first female commander in the school's history. I embraced the role as it involved teaching cadets the Air Force core values, professionalism, and commitment. After all, I had incorporated all of these attributes in all aspects of my life. I had to talk with each cadet before his or her commission. I saw discrimination, but I also saw it being addressed for the first time. My region commander, Colonel Kent Williams, was a black male. He was active duty. He was good people. I witnessed how hard he fought when he recognized discrimination or when we would bring an issue to him. He wanted to make things better for the ones that came after him. He also became my mentor. Dr. King said the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenges and controversy. He was a true leader and cared about not just black people, but all people. He understood the struggles and the rocky roads. He shared his story of his journey of becoming a pilot in Big Air Force. He led by example. After 3 short years, just like that, the time was up, and his time was up and so was mine. I learned so much in that short period of time. He would go on to another assignment, and I would return to the 172nd. This was in the midst of the COVID pandemic, when so many people were losing their lives because of it. And then the George Floyd incident happened. The George Floyd incident gave the world a brief glimpse into the world of a person of color. Yes, it was a horrible thing, but most people of color were not shocked or surprised because this is something that has been going on as long as I can remember. This is why my parents had the talk with me, I had it with my kids, and this is why every person of color has had the talk with someone they care about. The incident brought awareness to a much bigger issue than police brutality, systemic racism. The same issues that Dr. King fought against, we're still fighting today. Colonel Williams and Air Force ROTC fought against the same thing. We must all join in the fight. We must do that. We must do what we can to alleviate discrimination of all kinds. It's not one of us, but all of us, all people. When I arrived on base, I spoke to several airmen and colleagues who were feeling some kind of way about the incident. We talked about it with other black people, but have we talked about it with our white friends? Dr. King said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. He also said the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict. We have been silent because we sometimes feel nothing will change, but Dr. King encouraged us to reach out to our white friends and counterparts. We can't do this without them. Granted, this is a difficult conversation to have, but if we want to help each other, we must start here. Our white friends may not want to engage for fear of saying something offensive to us. We must get to know each other and the people we work with, no matter what race, gender, or background they came from. Dr. King said people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. By opening the lines of communication and saying something when discrimination raises its head, we can help each other exceed expectations. As mentioned before, these are some things that have helped me stay the course. As I wrap up my story, I want to encourage each of you to continue to write your own story so that you can share with others. I can truly say that this is by the grace of God that I'm standing here today and I am where I am. I shared with you how the core values were instilled in me early on, how I utilized faith and mentors as motivation to keep moving forward. And finally, I shared some ways that I believe we can help each other succeed. Expectation. I would like to leave you with this. We are surrounded by good people and bad people. But we as good people have to do our share to make things better for everyone involved. Dr. King said the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. It all begins and ends with the core values: integrity, service, excellence. Exceeding expectations is when you continue to demonstrate these values and not give up, even when you can clearly see the rocky road ahead. I'll end with my very last Dr. King quote. The first question which the priest and the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But the Good Samaritan reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my story.